I'm trapped in a cell, sleeping during the day and staying alert at night because I know my guard might betray me. Chapter 20. Until the end. POV. I woke up to the door to my cell opening. It was around mid-day. I always slept during the day. I didn't trust my guard enough to sleep at night. One of the men from the woods came in, followed by Atlas. My heart sunk. Forrest had told me a few things about what they did to rogues. I didn't want the last thing I saw in this world to be the face of someone who gave me a home but unknowingly took it away from me again. I don't think I could live through the betrayal of someone who had always kept me safe, causing me harm. And even if I did survive, I would lose the little trust I had built up over the weeks. I would be left a shell, like when I first came from my dad's. Atlas' voice snapped me out of my thoughts. We have two options here. Looking at me with no expression on his face. You need to shift back. Try as hard as you can because we need to know who you are by the end of the day, or by werewolf flaw. We have to kill you. His words sent fear rushing through me. I couldn't die. Then Forrest would never know what happened to me. He might think I ran off. I can't do that to him. But however hard I tried, I just couldn't shift back. I thought of my toes and my fingers, my hair and my skin. Nothing I tried worked. What if I'm stuck like this forever? No, everyone can shift back. We just need to find your trigger word. Have you tried thinking about hats? What? No, I don't even like hats. You think someone has a really strange shaped head and then you find out that they're just wearing a hat. You are weirder than I ever imagined. With that I felt her leave. I was all alone. I woke up to a crash. The cell door being flung open. I fell asleep. I shouldn't have fallen asleep. My limited time I had left to shift was rapidly decreasing. My favorite guard entered, a smile on his face. One more hour until your pathetic life finally ends. I can't wait. His wicked face stared down at me and he spat in my face as he spoke. He walked out the door with a smirk on his lips. I tried as hard as I could, trying everything I could to shift, but I still couldn't work out how. I lay my head on my paws. Trying to shift had used up lots of my valuable time. The door opened again, and the guard entered a second time. There has been a rogue attack. So I'm your guard, your only guard. His eyes glinted heavily as he grabbed a fistful of my fur, pulling me over to him. He trailed his hand up the back of my pelt, making me shiver in disgust. Disgust he seemed to mistake for pleasure. Do you like that? He asked me before taking his hand from my tail to my nose. I was too weak to stop him and too weak to fight back. I hadn't heard from my wolf all day, and all the other guards were out. If you were human, I'd spare you. It'll be a shame to watch you die. You would make a wonderful trophy. I nearly pewed. I just wanted to go home. I saw the clock on the wall outside my cell. It was 11:30. Half an hour left to live. The guard didn't leave. You'd think they would try to make my last half an hour a nice one. But no, I had to stay sitting on his lap the entire time, his hand running up my back, making me wish for my mate and to go home even more. Half an hour to live. I used to wish for death. Every day. When my brother and father showed me again and again how little I meant to them, I used to wish for death. Well, now I got my wish. Life. You can never enjoy it. You are always waiting for something. Waiting for the lesson, the end. Waiting to go home. Waiting for the holidays. Before you know it, your life is over. Everything takes too long but is gone too quickly. We spend our lives wishing them away. I looked at the wall. They had oh so helpfully made a countdown to my death. 1 minute left to live. I closed my eyes and wished to be back home. 55 seconds. I wished to be back with my mate. 50 seconds. I thought back to all the things that had happened since that day in my dad's basement. 30 seconds. I thought of all the time I had spent with Atlas and Ela. They took me under their wing and now they are sentencing me to death. 10 seconds. I thought of all the time I had spent with Forrest. How gentle he was with me. How protective. He always kept me safe no matter what. I thought of the way my heart skipped a beat whenever he stepped into the room. I heard a gasp and opened my eyes. It was time. Time for me to die. Goodbye, life. It was nice knowing you. I looked down and saw skin. I did it. I did it. I was going to live. The guard was almost salivating as he looked me head to toe. I quickly cowered into the corner, covering myself as best I could. I was safe from death, but I wasn't safe from the guard. He licked his lips, staring at me hungrily. He started to stalk over to me, but before he reached me the other guards got back. I let out a sigh of relief as one of them threw a shirt at me. I put it on and it came down to my knees, successfully covering everything vital. The guards dragged me to another dark room, where they tied me to a chair. What are they doing? I shifted back. I should go home. They want information. They're going to get it. No one knows who we are. How do we tell them? We don't. We hope they call in Atlas. Luckily just then one of them opened their phone. She shifted back. He listened for a few seconds for the reply, then hung up. The Alpha is at the other end of the territory. He will be in within the hour. I let out a sigh of relief. I would be home soon. While waiting for Atlas to arrive, the guards tried to get the answer they needed from me. Are you a part of a pack? I shook my head. I wasn't. Not yet. Forrest said I would join his pack when I was ready. But I wanted to live some sense of the normal life my dad took away from me since I was young. How old are you? I didn't want to talk to these men. I only wanted to talk to my family. I held up 10 fingers, then 7. 17. I nodded. Do you have a mate? What do I say? I nodded my head. They wrote that down as well as all the other info they had found to show Atlas when he arrived. The guards all observed me with caution. They didn't understand why I wasn't a part of a pack but not a rogue, and my scent, which still had some human in it, didn't help their confusion. After an hour of them asking questions and me deciding how to answer, Atlas arrived. He didn't look at me but went straight to the man with the clipboard. What did you find out? He asked, looking down at my answers. He read them and turned to one of the men. Do we know her name yet? He still wasn't looking at me. No, the guard answered. We tried asking her, but she wouldn't answer. I was bored of this game. Only one way to make Atlas realize what has happened. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeline Nilben, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. My name is Arya. I watched as Atlas, head whipped round at my voice. A look of surprise flashed onto his face, quickly replaced by understanding and regret. Sighing deeply and without saying anything, he turned on his heels and walked out the door. The guards all looked at me suspiciously. I suppose their Alpha did just walk out the room because of my name. I could still smell Atlas outside the room, so I guess he was trying to get his head around what had happened. I hope he manages soon because I want to go home. A few minutes later, Atlas walked back in, ignoring the guards calling out to him, asking him what happened. He kept his attention on me and asked one question. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeline Nilben, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. I could hear the disbelief in his voice. Yep, I nodded, without saying any more to me, and without acknowledging the guards. He pulled out his phone and dialed a number. Come to the cells, he said before hanging up and turning back to me, untying me from the chair. A few minutes later the door was flung open. A storm of power that could only ever be Forrest came storming in. He didn't notice me at first. Like father, like son. What do you need, Dad? I kind of need to be searching for Arya. Annoyance clear on his face. My heart warmed at his words. He really cares about me enough to look for me. It's been weeks since I shifted. I would have thought he had given up on me by now. You know that rogue we captured the day Arya went missing? Atlas said, waiting for Forrest to nod before continuing. She finally shifted back. At that moment the wind changed direction and my scent went flying towards him. I could see the exact moment it reached him. His head whipped in my direction. No, please no, he said, shaking his head. What's wrong? Did he not want me anymore? All this time, she's been here. All this time. Atlas nodded. He ran over to me. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I didn't realize. I didn't even consider it. These last weeks must have been hell for you. I was pulled into a tight hug. Forrest kept repeating, I'm sorry, over and over again. He pulled me impossibly closer. I thought I'd lost you forever. I relaxed into his embrace. There was only one place I wanted to go now. Can we just go home? I was tired and cold, and I needed a shower. Yes, but we do need to know what happened, Forrest said, looking me in the eye. I nodded inside. It was going to be a long explanation. As soon as we arrived home, I jumped in the shower. I was covered in dust and grime and I felt disgusting. I hadn't had a shower in a few weeks and I needed to get clean. I could hear Forrest pacing in our room. He kept muttering to himself. My wolf was whimpering for me to go to him. She didn't like being separate from him when we'd only just got him back. I agreed. I had missed him so much. I quickly finished showering and got dressed, heading out the bathroom and straight into Forrest's embrace. I'm sorry. Calling me into a tight hug. Stop apologizing. I muttered into his chest. You did it now. You couldn't have done anything. I heard the door downstairs open and the sound of feet running upstairs. Eel came running in, putting me from Forrest's arms into a hug from her. Oh, Arya, I was so worried about you. Tears streaming down her cheeks. I thought your scent was familiar, but I didn't know you could shift, so I never even considered it. I smiled at her with tears running down my own cheeks. I didn't think I could either, but here we are. As soon as Atlas came back from vaguely explaining things to the guards, satisfying their inquisitive minds without actually telling them anything, we all congregated in the sitting room for me to explain what happened. I had a headache all day, but I used to get bad headaches all the time when I was younger, so I just ignored it. I started explaining what happened that day, telling my story to the group of strangers that had become a family to me. Chapter 21 is watching you Arya's POV. I woke up in the middle of the night to a bang from downstairs. Forrest was still asleep next to me, and I knew I shouldn't. Horror movies taught me that much, but I got up and headed to the kitchen, hoping it was just Atlas or Ela. As I walked, I was aware it was very dark. No stars in the sky to light my way. I made it to the kitchen and turned on the light. Looking around the kitchen, it was empty. It was your imagination, my wolf said, making me jump. It was a lot to get used to, having another voice in my head. I agreed with her and went to get a glass of water. Looking out the window into the woods, I was lost in thought, thinking about what had happened the last few weeks. I was glad I'd figured out how to shift. Otherwise I'd be gone. Suddenly my gaze was drawn to the tree line. There was something there. It looked in my direction, right through the window. It looked me in the eye. I looked away for a second to make sure the door was locked, but when I looked back, the man was gone. He must have gone back into the trees. I went to the sink to refill my glass and that's when I finally screamed. I screamed because the man, was pressed up against the window. He was the same man as before, and he wasn't moving. He was just staring at me. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nilben, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. Forrest and Ela all ran into the kitchen and looked to where I was staring. Atlas let out a low growl and I turned to look at him. I looked back at the window, but the man was gone. Atlas ran outside to see if he could find the man. Forrest pulled me into his arms, wiping tears from my cheek I didn't even realize I had shed. Hey, it's okay. Stroking my hair and holding me, keeping me safe. He was staring at me. He wouldn't move. I don't know who he was. He wouldn't stop staring. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nilben, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. Forrest and some of the warriors had been circling the house and surrounding woods for the last few hours, trying to pick up any scent they could, but the man had disappeared with no trace. Again, I was sitting at the kitchen table, eating my breakfast while trying not to look out the window. I was scared if I looked at the window he would be there, staring at me. Unmoving. Atlas came in and let out a tired sigh. I sent the warriors home. Forrest is still looking. There is no trace of him. No scent. No footprints. No nothing. If I hadn't seen him myself, I wouldn't have believed he was there at all. Ida came over and handed him a plate of toast and gave him a kiss on the cheek. He can't have just disappeared. Atlas just sighed before grabbing a piece of toast. After I had finished breakfast, I went up to my room. I was confused. How does this man keep getting away from a pack of wolves with no trace? I was lost in thought as I climbed the stairs. So lost in thought I didn't see the man in front of me until his hand was over my mouth and my hands were restrained behind my back. My wolf snarled in my mind, and I thrashed in the arms of my captor. I felt his breath against my ear as he leaned down to whisper something to me. You see how easy it was for me to get to you. Nothing you or your pathetic mutts can do stop me. This is your final warning. I will be back. Suddenly I was thrown against the wall and I screamed as the man ran out the room. Through the window. Before I was even back on my feet, he was out the window and disappearing into the woods. Elia and Atlas ran up the stairs as I stared out the window, where the man had just been. Atlas searched all around the room, but there was no trace of him. I didn't even know him, and he was turning my life upside down. Forrest came back home and searched again, but again he found nothing. I could sense his wolf close to the surface. He was angry and ready to retaliate if he only knew who to retaliate at. I lay my hand on his arm, stopping him in his mad rampage around our room. I'm sorry. To my agent extraordinaire, Mahlin Nilben. Heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. It's my fault he came here. It's me he wants. Forrest turned and pulled me into a tight hug. It's not your fault and he certainly isn't having you. You're mine. A few months ago, if someone had said I was theirs, I would have been angry, or scared, very scared. But this felt right. Because I was Forrest and he was mine. Why don't I help you with your wolf? Learn to shift quicker and we could go for a run. Just forget the stress for a bit. I nodded my head. I wanted to go for a run with Forrest. We ran into the woods while Forrest told me how to shift. I hid behind a tree and did as he said. I imagined being in my wolf form, my black paws and soft fur, and suddenly I was a wolf. I walked out from behind my tree slowly. I was still a bit wobbly on my paws. As Forrest came out from behind a tree further away, his wolf a beautiful brown, I suddenly remembered where I had seen his wolf before. I had seen him in a dream, the day we met, and many more after that. Suddenly, from the back of my mind I felt a soft push and I heard Forrest in my mind. You ready, Arya? I looked around, looking for the source of the sound. Although I knew it was in my mind, I didn't want to believe it. It was unbelievable. It's okay, Arya. It's just the mind link. You'll get used to it soon. I nodded my wolfy head and tried to link him back. He smiled at me and nodded. It was like speaking to someone, but in your head, and no one else could hear your conversation, unless you let them. When in wolf form all wolves can communicate through a mind link, you must allow them into your mind. So you will feel a push which you either accept or reject. Like just then, this link only works in wolf form, but mates, once they are mated, also have another link which works in both forms, their own special form of communication. I listened to Forrest explaining the different links, and it did make some sense. It helped me piece together a few more pieces of the puzzle. Forrest gently nudged me forward and we started running. I was a little off balance. I wasn't used to running on 4 legs, but Forrest was always there if I fell. We ran through the trees, jumping over fallen branches and weaving through trees. It was the best feeling in the world. We ran until we got to a small stream. Forrest stood guard first while I drank my fill. Then Forrest had a drink. He didn't need anyone to stand guard for him. He was an alpha wolf. Only an idiot would try to challenge him. Once we had both had a long drink, Forrest lay down in the sun, motioning with his head for me to join him. I lay on the ground, the sun soaking into my fur, my head resting on Forrest, listening to the sounds of the trees swaying in the breeze and the river flowing downstream. I felt so relaxed, so safe, so free. I knew Forrest was still plagued by the man in our room. So was I. The way he managed to disappear like that, it was unreal. I wanted to ask the question that had been plaguing my mind for days. What if you found someone you loved more than your mate? He looked down at me, confusion written on his face. It doesn't happen. No wolf loves another more than their mate. He sounded so insistent. But it must happen sometime. Hypothetically though, what if they found someone who hadn't found their mate? If they hadn't either, could they mark them? I shifted slightly. I was confused about mates. The one person you were destined to love the most. Forrest nudged my head slightly. Hypothetically, yes, they could mark them. But that never happens. I don't know a single wolf who wouldn't do anything for their mate. It's the way we were made. We were made to love our mate, not someone else's. I looked over at the trees watching them sway in the breeze. I found since I had got my wolf, I had much better senses. I could hear so much more, see so much more. Everything was wonderful. Everything was perfect. Until it wasn't. We continued running through the woods until we got to the pack line. The guards on patrol all bowed their heads to Forrest. That's when I saw him. That guy. He looked over at me and smirked, coming over as Forrest went to talk to another guard, leaving me all alone with him. He came over to me and whispered in my ear, "This isn't over." Winking at me as he ran his hand up my fur, making me bristle with disgust. "You may think you're safe, but we will find you, and you will be mine. You can't escape us. Look at how easily we infiltrated your ranks. Look how easily we sneak past your little wolf. And you can't tell anyone. Your mate may believe you, but the pack will believe me. And then Forrest may got thrown out the pack for disrupting the pack peace. You want that human." He walked away, a cocky swagger in his step as he walked. His threat rang in my mind. He was one of them. He was working with the man who got into my room, but I had no proof. I couldn't stop him. I couldn't stop him. Loud. Too loud. Everything was too loud. Too bright. Just like the first time I shifted. But this time it was worse. I could smell everything, hear everything, taste the scents on the wind and feel the bumps of the ground beneath my feet. The sounds surrounding me were distorted. I couldn't make out anyone's voices. They all blurred together. The light was shining in my eye, making me squint. The colors were all wrong. I span around, trying to figure out who the screaming, squealing, unnaturally colored shapes I presumed to be humans were. I heard an echo of a voice calling out my name. I heard it over and over again as it reverberated around my mind. Once, twice, again and again. I did the only thing I could, the only thing I knew how. Chapter 22, Runaway Forest's POV. I saw Arya talking to one of the warriors who guarded her cell. I guess he wanted to apologize, but I was too far away to hear what they were saying. I walked over to the head guard. I had to explain why the girl from the cells was out running with me. I didn't want to tell him she was my mate, because then they would expect her to join the pack and take an active role in the paperwork and cat stuff that she isn't ready for. How did I let this happen? At night she was plagued with nightmares of her time in the cells. She wouldn't kick or scream. She would just hunch up, very still and shake, tears streaming down her face. I tried asking her what her dream was about, but she wouldn't tell me. Only that it was about the cells, and that it didn't matter. She was home again. I sighed and turned to the guard in front of me, deciding how best to word it. She's a newly shifted were. Her family didn't want her, so she's staying with us. Me and Dad had decided that telling them the truth, but missing out the facts that she's my mate, would probably be the best way to go about answering the questions. So how did she end up in our cells? The guard asked, looking confused. I looked over at Arya. She was still with the guard. We didn't know she had shifted. She shifted in the woods. No one was around, so we didn't realize it was her. I hung my head in shame. She shouldn't have had to go through all that. Suddenly, from the corner of my eye, I saw Arya. She was breathing heavily with her hands over her ears and her eyes darting around, as if she was on drugs. I had heard about this, but never seen it personally. It only ever happens in newly shifted werewolves, and very rarely at that. Their senses go into overdrive and they need to be sedated into its tops, otherwise they could get hurt. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeline Nilben, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. I slowly walked over to her, knowing she couldn't see me properly, talking to her so as not to spook her. Hey Arya, it's okay. It will stop soon. Just come here and I'll get it to stop. I could see by her face that she could hear me, but she didn't recognize my voice, and couldn't understand what I was saying. I started to walk quicker. She didn't know it was me. I needed to get to her before she got hurt. But before I got there she did the worst thing possible. She ran. I ran after her, but she was running in blind panic. She was fast and not planning on stopping anytime soon. She was running into the tree branches and tripping over roots. But she didn't feel it. She just continued running. I kept running after her. Faster and faster. I was gaining on her. But then I tripped on a tree branch, twisting my ankle as I fell. I hit the ground with a thud and groaned out in pain but didn't stop. I continued running after her, as fast as my bust ankle would allow. I was losing her. She was getting too far ahead. There was too much distance for me to catch up. I could see her disappear into the horizon. I could no longer see her, but I didn't give up. I wouldn't stop until she was safe. And at the moment she was far from safe, I heard Arya growl from up ahead and sped up. I had to find her. As I broke through the tree line and saw why she growled, I almost fell to the floor in relief. Ash was sitting on her back, keeping her pinned to the floor, while Sky had her phone out, calling someone. What the hell is wrong with her? Ash called out as I limped closer. Arya thrashed from side to side, but Ash was stronger and kept her pinned to the ground. We were just walking back, thinking that WE should come and visit you soon, when Arya burst through the trees. She looked drunk or drugged or something and she tried to attack me. Hence why she's pinned to the floor. What on earth happened? I'll tell you soon. First we need to call the pack doctor. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeline Nilben, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. Wincing as Arya hit her head off the floor, trying to escape. I've already done it. I called your parents as well, Sky said, holding up her phone. She's on her way. I walked over to Arya, with Ash still restraining her on the floor. It'll be okay. After what felt like hours, although it can't have been more than a few minutes, the pack doctor arrived. She was a tall, middle-aged woman who had seen too much grief in her life. What seems to be the problem? She said to me with a smile. I need you to sedate the girl on the floor. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeline Nilben, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. Not wanting to but knowing the other options were much worse, I heard Ash growl at my words. Is Wolf not liking me sedating my mate? My wolf agreed, but what else could I do? Just trust me. I'll explain later. He nodded as the doctor, Nat, sedated Arya. I watched as she stopped fighting and her eyes closed. She was asleep. She would be okay soon. I scooped her up, holding her close to me as my parents awaited their car so we could get her home. My parents had guessed what had happened when Sky called them, so they already had everything we needed sent up. I gently placed Arya under the covers of our bed as it would be a few hours until she woke up and walked downstairs, where Ash and Sky were waiting for an explanation. What the hell just happened? How could you so easily sedate your mate? She's human, for God's sake. That sedative could kill her. Ash exploded as soon as I walked into the sitting room. Not quite, I answered quietly. I looked over at a confused expression. You said she's human, but she's not. Not quite. I sighed as I looked at Ash and Sky. They were on the edge of their seats, wanting to know what had happened while they'd been away. A few days after you left Arya went missing. She was missing for weeks until she turned up. She was a rogue we had been holding in our cells. She had been in our cells the whole time. Sky looked up, her head cocked to the side as she thought. How on earth didn't you recognize her and tell them she wasn't a rogue? Why was she there for weeks? Because, well, you see, we didn't recognize her. I looked over to where they sat, glaring at me. Ash looked like he was about to explode. What on earth happened to stop you from recognizing your mate? That's impossible, unless you had amnesia. But we would have been told. Well, no, not quite. It's a much simpler explanation than that. You see, she had shifted. I looked over at them as they looked at me like I was mad. Shock evident on their faces. So, she has shifting senses? Sky asked, piecing the puzzle together. I nodded. And that's why you sedated her. Not to be mean, but because you had to. I nodded again and shrugged. There was no other option. We continued to sit on the sofa. I caught them up on what they missed as my parents cooked tea while we waited for Arya to wake up. There was no way of knowing how it would affect her, as it affected everyone differently. Shifting senses, the technical name for when newly shifted werewolves' senses get too strong for them to cope, starts off with slightly heightened senses. They grow and grow until they are noticeable and the wolf starts to react. Like Arya did. If they aren't sedated, it gets worse until they black out, go into a coma, or, worst case, an aereo, die. Some wolves only get one sense enhanced. That is easier to treat and doesn't always need sedatives. Usually only painkiller to dull it down a bit. 2 or 3 enhanced senses are where it starts to get dangerous. The wolf gets confused and disoriented and usually needs to be sedated. Arya, on the other hand, had a very rare case of all 5 senses. Even just for senses are very dangerous, and if it isn't treated quickly, the wolf may die. Even once sedated, it is very hit or miss. The one thing I do know is that Arya is strong. She won't give up without a fight, and she will survive. She has to. I was sitting at the kitchen doing homework to take my mind off Arya when my mum walked in with a troubled look on her face. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nilban, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. You might want to come and see this. I followed her upstairs to my room, over to where Arya lay. Look at her back. I looked at her back and nearly lost control of my wolf. Her beautiful skin was littered with scars. Some looked years old, faded white lines, a permanent memory of him. Some of them, though, looked a lot newer. Some even looked just a few days to a few weeks old. She wasn't with her dad a few weeks ago. She was in the cells. I put my head in my hands. They're new. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nilban, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. Raising my head to look my mum in the eye. Who was it? Who attacked my mate? My voice was dripping with cold fury, matched by the murderous look in my mum's eye. I don't know. Moving to the stairs. But I will find out. With that, she went downstairs, going to try to find out who thought it was a good idea to hurt a member of an alpha family. Because after all this time, my parents loved her like a daughter. I grabbed some bandages from the cupboard and wrapped her back up, careful not to do it too tight. I was worried about her. There was always something wrong, and I didn't know how to break the cycle. But I will. I will break the cycle if it's the last thing I do in this world. No one will touch her again. Chapter 23, The Pack Arya's POV. I woke up to my head pounding and the sound of a million bees swarming around me. I opened my eyes a crack but instantly shut them again, wincing at the light. Everything was hurting. I wanted to go back to sleep, but I want to know what was going on first. I cracked my eyes open again, this time fighting against the light to see where I was and what was going on. The memories of what happened came back to me, making me cringe slightly. The sound, even the smells were all too strong. Once I could finally open my eyes, I looked around the room, reaching up to rub the back of my head where I could feel a lump. Forrest was asleep next to me, and from the look of it, it was the middle of the night. I was still tired, so I went back to sleep. I would find out what happened in the morning. When I woke up again, the sun was streaming through the curtains and Forrest was gone. I sat up and slowly walked down the stairs, towards the smell of food and a noise of quiet chatter. When I reached the doorway, the chat died down and everyone round the table looked over at me. Hi, I said quietly, confused about why everyone was looking at me. Forrest stood up,
knocking over his chair,
pulling me into a tight hug, as Atlas and Ida smiled from across the table. I was so worried about you, Forrest said, pulling me tight against him. I thought you may never wake up. I smiled at him and sat down at the table once he realized me from his hug. You can't get rid of me that easily. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nilben, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. Causing Ida to laugh from the other side of the table. What happened? How long was I out? Atlas smiled sadly from across the table. Shifting senses. Your senses got too strong for you to cope, so we had to sedate you. Otherwise you could have hurt yourself. It affects everyone differently, so we didn't know what would happen. You were only out for a day. I nodded my head in understanding before another thought hit me. Haven't I missed? Like a ton of school. I haven't been back since I shifted, and that was weeks ago. Forrest put a plate of food in front of me and I tucked in while Leela answered. As far as the school are concerned, we are on a holiday far, far away and won't be back until next week. I smiled over at her and nodded. What shall we do? Excited at all the possibilities. Well, we do need to check on the pack. You could come and help. Nothing too hard. Just some rounds to meet some of the pack. Atlas suggested. I nodded again. I liked the sound of meeting some of the pack. Maybe I would get to see the children again. After breakfast was cleared up, I went upstairs to get changed. I put on red tartan skirt and brushed through my hair. Before I went downstairs, I grabbed my phone off charge and checked my notifications. A text from my father. You thought you saw the last of me, but little bitch, I am not done with you. Not by a long way. I will be back, and I will win. Just you wait. I felt my shake as fear consumed me. He was another person on my list to look out for. It was growing, along with my fear. I just wanted to be free. I locked my phone as I heard Forrest come up behind me. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nilben, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. Are you okay? You look scared. Should I tell him? Could I tell him? Yes, my wolf yelled. He's your mate. You have to tell him. No, I'm fine. I just got some dust in my eye. That's all. I heard my wolf howl in protest at the back of my mind. But I shut her out. We would have to deal with this on our own. I am worthless. I can't burden Forrest with this. He has enough on his plate already. Suddenly Forrest asked the question that I never wanted to answer. What happened to your back? I slowly looked over at him. My dad and brother happened. You know that. Why do you ask? Forrest looked down at the mention of my dad and brother. For some reason he felt guilty. No, some of your scars are new. What happened in the cells, Riano? He saw the scars from the guard. I tried to get out and cut myself on the silver bars. I didn't want to. But what could I do? I couldn't tell him. The guard said if I told anyone, he would kill everyone I cared about. I wouldn't do that. I wasn't worth that much. I walked downstairs with Forrest following close behind. He didn't look completely convinced, but he knew not to push any further. He wouldn't find anything. After driving for a few minutes, we arrived at a building I recognized as the pack house. Ela turned off the car engine and I climbed out the door. I had seen the pack house before, but never up close. It was magnificent. It was old-fashioned but modern at the same time, with red brick walls and glass windows. The garden was just as spectacular. Honeysuckle climbed the walls and rose bush lined the path. It was magical. We walked up the path and into the house. Everyone inside bowed with a synchronized. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nilben, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. Luna. I looked over to Forrest for an explanation and he laughed before explaining. My mum and dad are the alpha and Luna of the pack. They rule the pack. This is a show of respect. I nodded to show him I understood before looking around the house again. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nilban, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. Who is this? An older woman said, while looking down her nose at me. She looked like a snob and she was sure acting like one. Arya, this is Winfidora, the head cook. Winfidora. This is Arya. She is staying at this pack while we sort some things out for her. Ela answered, bending the truth a little so I didn't have to tell them I'm Forrest's mate. Winfidora just sniffed down at me, whispering so only I could hear the funniest thing I have ever heard anyone say to someone they hate. I hope you don't find your mate in this pack. I would hate to have to put up with you every day. I just smiled at her, knowing I had already won, almost laughing out loud at the irony of her words. Still silently laughing from that we continued on to meet higher, ranking wolves. You already know Ash. This is his dad Albert, the beta, and his mate Ollie. I smiled at them, and shook Albert's hand before looking towards Ash. Good to see you are feeling better, you ugly shrimp, Ash said, grinning at me, his words full of humor. I shook my head at him. Immature, but funny. Once we had met everyone, Forrest, Ash and Sky, who had joined us after I had met everyone, took me around the house and the garden. It was beautiful. I could have stayed there all day, but then my tummy rumbled, and food is more important than a garden, so I left to get food. Since I was hungry, everyone else decided to come with me to get food. Apparently, Forrest had picked up on the hostile behavior from Winfidora, so decided she might try something if I went in alone. I would like to see her try. Once we got to the kitchen, though, I was glad the others had come with me. Lots of people were staring at me, but no one had the opportunity to say anything against me. Before we got food, Atlas and Ida came into the kitchen. We're all done here. Are you ready to leave? Atlas asked. Forrest half nodded before answering. We were just going to get some food, but we can get some at home. I was quite glad to walk out that kitchen. I had felt curious and heated glances following me around the kitchen, and I was more than ready to get out of the spotlight. On the way home, everyone seemed quieter than usual. Even Forrest looked a little subdued and Atlas looked almost outraged. I don't know much about packs, or even reading people's facial expressions. I looked round the car at the worried and angry faces, but I'm guessing something was wrong. Forrest took my hand and he's kissing the back before answering. Rogues had been coming around our house for weeks. It's on the edge of Packland, so 1 or 2 would be expected, but we had more than usual. And any and all rogue sightings have been around our house. We have guards around the woods near the house. They shouldn't be getting past. Not so many of them. I nodded. Okay, but why do you look kind of angry? It didn't make sense being angry at rogues because, from the sound of it, they don't really care. This time it was Atlas who answered. Because they're blaming you. One of the guards must have let on that you were a rogue from our cells, and now no one trusts you. A load of my trusted men have been telling me to throw you out, or some even suggested killing you. For the good of the pack. They don't seem to trust my judgment anymore. Ela took his hand to calm him down. He looked as if he was about to shift right here in the car. She turned to me. But of course that's never going to happen. We're not going to let you get at all because some pack members don't know the full story. I nodded before the car resumed its thoughtful silence. It's my fault again. Why is it always my fault? Now, because of me. The pack is starting to turn on at this. I can't let that happen. I will talk to them. I will show them the truth. Chapter 24, My Family Arya's POV. I knew I had to go and talk to the pack. I couldn't leave them like this, not trusting their alpha. It was my fault and I put it right. I had to wait for the right time to do it. I couldn't just walk out. It would be suspicious. So instead I made sure the place we were visiting the next day was close to the pack house. I could sneak away. I just had to act normal until then. Are you hungry? Forrest asked from beside me on the sofa. We had been watching a movie. I nodded. I am. Do you want any? Forrest thought about it for a minute before answering. I'll cook it. You stay here. I've seen this movie loads anyway. We were watching Aladdin, which I had never seen, but apparently, it's a classic. You have to watch it at least once. So here I am, watching it. Forrest soon came back with some food, beans on toast and a hot chocolate. An odd combo but tasty nonetheless. I smiled gratefully at him and ate my meal, hoping he didn't mind much about my plan. Not that I was going to tell him. He'd almost certainly try to stop me. Once I finished my plate, I passed it to Forrest and curled up, putting my feet up towards my chest while Aladdin flew around on his magic carpet. As the movie played, I felt my eyelids droop. I felt Forrest pick me up and carry me to bed, putting me close, knowing my mate was by my side, and knowing with finality what I had to do, helped me drift quickly into an uninterrupted sleep. The next morning flashed by in a blur. I was set on what I had to do, so set I was barely there. Forrest suggested I stayed home because I didn't seem quite right. I told him I was completely fine, and made sure I wasn't left behind. I had to do this. We got in the car, driving to the pack training grounds. They were a few minutes away from the pack and I hadn't seen them before. A perfect opportunity for me to get close to the pack house. The training ground were quite busy, full of warriors fighting, doing press up or just running around. We walked around for a bit. Forrest showed me the fighting rings and the monkey bars I was already itching to have a go at. I didn't miss the curious looks the warriors were giving me, or the way they looked at Atlas every time he spoke to me. They didn't trust him anymore, and it was my job to make it right. I wouldn't let my past haunt my future. As soon as a few warriors came over to talk to Forrest and Atlas, I snuck off, making sure no one saw me as I walked quickly towards the pack house. I knew I had to be quick because as soon as Forrest noticed, I was gone he would track me down. And he was fast. I walked into the pack house, closing the door with a bang, causing some of the wolves I saw yesterday come scurrying out from various rooms. As soon as they saw me, they turned their noses up in disgust. "What are you doing here, rogue?" The venom in their eyes that held my gaze was enough to make me flinch, although only slightly. "I've come to tell you the truth, and to clear your alpha's name. To my agent extraordinaire, Mylan Nilban, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm." My voice unwavering. I had one job and wild horses wouldn't stop me from accomplishing it. They all scoffed but followed me outside, where more wolves had gathered to hear what I had to say. I know I smell like a rogue, but I promise you I am not. I knew what I had to say, what I had to do to keep my family safe. I saw some of the wolves start to take interest, while others still looked at me with hate. I'm not part of a pack, because I didn't know about Werewolf. Your alpha saved me. He figured out I was a wolf and has been looking after me, while he showed me how to control my beast and how to live as one of you. I saw some more wolves join the group, some wolves from the training. I was running out of time. Your alpha decided to leave me as a root for a bit, while I learned a bit about pack life. He didn't want to overwhelm me or put the pack in danger, so that is why I smell of rogue. I, however, am not a rogue. I could see the wolves in the crowd gathered around me nod their heads. They believed me. I had managed. They trusted their alpha again. Nothing could go wrong. "Nice." I heard someone from the back yell. I looked over at them. "To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nilban, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm." It would be him. She is lying. She is working with the rogues, getting you to trust her so she can attack our pack. I saw some of the wolves, not in agreement, but some still seemed to believe me. It wasn't a lost cause. Yet, until a wolf came charging through the woods. There had been a rogue attack. The warrior wolves are fighting them off, but they're outnumbered. I shifted and ran as fast as I could to get to the clearing where the training was done. I got there just as I saw a rogue leap for Ela. An injured Ela. Some stupid rogue was threatening my family. I saw Ed. I jumped at the rogue, knocking them out of the air and away from Ela. With no remorse I killed the rogue, ripping out his throat before tossing his limp body away and moving on to the next one. I stood keeping guard over Ela, keeping any rogues away from her while looking for Atlas and Forest. The clearing was a massacre, littered with wolf bodies, dead and injured. Luckily, from the stench, it seemed to be mainly rogues. I saw Atlas fighting nearby. He looked pretty beat up. His wolf seemed to be limping and he was bleeding out from a gash on his flank. But he was still fighting and standing strong. Making sure Ela was being covered by a warrior wolf, I ran over to help him, knocking the wolves over and dripping out their throats. I still couldn't see Forest, but I could see the number of rogues were diminishing. We were winning. It would be over soon. I took out another wolf who tried to sneak up on Atlas before the remaining rogues retreated, realizing they couldn't win. I saw Ash, his parents, and Sky, who had joined the fight a bit after me, running after them, as well as a few warrior wolves. They wouldn't get far. Atlas limped over to Ela, nudging her with his head before the blood loss seemed to catch up on him and he fell net to her. I saw the pack doctor hurry past and I went to find Forest, hoping they would be okay. I saw Forest on the edge of the clearing. He was lying limply on his side. I ran to him, checking he was still breathing, which he was, but shallowly. He had shifted back, and I had grabbed some clothes on the way which I covered him up with to keep him warm. Some wolves ran over to carry him to the doctor. I was worried about him, but, just like Ely and Atlas, there was nothing to do except hope. I saw the head of warriors, a man and at yesterday, looking over at the injured. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Noben, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. Ela and Forest had got the worst of it since they had been protecting the other wolves as well as themselves. It's all my fault. Hanging his head as he watched the doctor treat Atlas. I shook my head. He couldn't know they would attack. No, it's not your fault. You didn't know they would attack. She's right. It's not your fault. I turned to look at who was speaking. Oh no. I saw various wolves around me start to nod their heads. You distracted us. Wormed your way into the Alpha Trust before stabbing him in the back and telling the rogues where the Alpha family would be today, so they could attack. I shook my head. No, I could never do that. They were my family, but with the only people who could protect me were the hunting after the rogues or lying unconscious on the ground. There wasn't much I could do to make them change their minds. I was grabbed from the behind. My arms whipped into behind my back and I was dragged towards a pole with a metal collar on the end of a chain. It looked like a dog collar, but so much worse. They pulled me up to the pole and snapped the collar shut round my neck. It burnt as it touched my flesh, but I didn't feel it. All I could think about was how my mate and my family, the people I cared for most in this world, were lying unconscious in the pack hospital. I would trade in my own life for this. I saw some wolves gather around me, disgust written on their faces once more. You'll be chained up here until the Alpha and his family are better. If they survive, they decide what to do with you. If they die, so do you. I was glad at that. If they died, I wouldn't want to keep on living. As long as I was chained up, my family was safe. I took comfort in that. If I was let out, they were better. If they died, I would die too. I wouldn't want it any other way. I would have preferred to not be chained up, but if I had to be, at least I was okay with the terms. I knew as soon as Atlas, or Forest got better, I would be out of here. I was drifting somewhere between awake and asleep. I wasn't awake, but I couldn't sleep with a collar around my neck. It burnt my neck raw and bit my skin, but the pain of my family being hurt was worse. Suddenly, from the tree line, came charging two figures I recognized. Ash charged over to the guard. A nice, normal guard, while Sky came over to me. I'm so sorry. We didn't know you were here. Ash has been yelling at the pack for hours, but they won't let you go. They won't even listen to Albert. And he's the beta. Short of telling them you're Forest's mate, there is nothing more we can do. I shook my head at her. It's okay. The pack is in flux until their Alpha family gets better. I am in here until they get better. As long as they get better, I'll be fine. Just keep an eye on them for me. Keep them safe. Sky nodded. I promise you will keep them safe until they are better. Ash came over, anger written all over his face. They won't listen to me. I tried to at least get them to chain you with normal metal, not silver, but they said you betrayed the pack, so you deserve much worse. The only thing stopping me from killing them all is the satisfaction I will get from seeing Atlas, Elo and Forrest reaction to this. They won't let the pack keep you chained up, and it will be funny to see Atlas explode at the guards who thought it could possibly be you who hurt them. I grinned at Ash. He was right, it would be a sight to see. They kept me company for a bit longer, keeping my mind off Forrest and the silver biting into my neck, until they had to go. I drifted off to sleep, hoping my family recovered soon. Chapter 25, Another Day. Arya's POV. I woke up to another day of pain. The wolves from the pack jeer and the guards poke the silver, causing a wave of pain to flow over me. But I was still alive. That means they were still alive. From my position on the top of the mound, I could see most of the pack, the trees and woods, my home, the cells, and the pack hospital where my family lay recovering. My favorite guard came over every day at midday and whipped me with silver in front of some of the pack, who found it a sport to watch. I had cuts running from my neck to my knees which refused to heal because of the silver. It reminded me of my dad, and that notion, however true, scared me because I thought I had left that all behind months ago. Sky and Ash came to see me at dusk. They gave me updates on Atlas, Enthusiasm, Elia and Forrest, and told me what the pack were thinking, the atmosphere and the underlying worry and fear that no one wanted to say out loud. The Alpha family kept them safe. Without the Alpha, the pack would go into ruin. I was worried. I wanted to see them myself. Last time I saw them, they all looked so close to death. Ela was deathly pale. Atlas had just collapsed next to her and Forrest. My wolf kept whining out for him, wishing to be next to him, hoping he would be okay. Some of the warrior wolves I'd met at the pack house came up to me holding a pail of water. They poured some into a bowl for me, which I licked up first, not caring about my dignity to lap up water from a dog bowl, soon to spit it out as the dissolved silver burnt my throat. They sneered at me, laughing at my pain. I couldn't find it in my heart to hate them, because behind the hate in their eyes, I saw fear. They were scared for the Alpha family and not knowing who to trust. They blamed me because the only other people who it could be in the pack, and they didn't want to believe someone in the pack would do it. The days stretched on, not really because of the ever-constant pain, the pack's hate-filled gazes, or the fact that my life has become laying on the floor with a metal collar of our neck as I waited for death or freedom, but because of the constant waiting, hoping, wishing they would get better and it could all go back to normal. I fell into an almost sleep. My mind needed to rest, but my thoughts were whirling round at 1,000,000 miles an hour, never stopping or letting me rest. I woke up waiting for the daily torture to begin, waiting for the pain, but also comfort in knowing I wasn't dead, and that means neither were they. But today was different. The pack wolves came walking past with their heads bowed and tears in their eyes. The guards came past, glaring at me as if all their problems were my fault, but hurrying me past without raising a hand to me. This worried me. It meant change. Change could mean they were better. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeline Nilben, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. The suspense was killing me. No one would tell me anything. I wasn't free, but I wasn't dead. It was Sky who finally put me out of my misery. She came up to me with red eyes but a relieved smile on her face. What's happening? Are they okay? Are they dead? Are they awake? She shook her head before telling me. Ela nearly died this morning. I gasped, tears pricking my eyes before she continued. She pulled through, and now the doctor said they are all much closer to waking up. I let out a relieved sigh. As Ash came over, the pack doesn't know what to do. Some want to kill you right now. Some are willing to let the Alpha wake up and do the honors himself, which of course won't happen, but they think it will. I nodded. It had been pretty much the same every day. The pack wanted to kill me. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeline Nilben, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. Elo and Forrest still weren't awake, and every day I got more and more worried that they may never wake up, or I may be dead before they do. I was woken out of my sleepy daze by a sound in the night. Not a normal sound. I was used to normal sounds. But this wasn't normal. I looked around, looking for the source of the sound. I had heard it every night at midnight. I never found the source of the sound, and I never got used to it. It always woke me from my daze. My wolf, though now weak from the silver, wouldn't let me rest again until the sound was gone. I never found the source of the sound. Until now. And I wish I hadn't. On the edge of the tree line, grinning madly, was the man. The one who was in the garden. The one who was in my room. And the one who threatened me. He was staring at me, his head tilted to the side, his mouth contorted into an impossibly wide grin, and he was laughing. The sound I could never place. His manic laughing. Every day for an hour he stood on the edge of the tree line, smiling and laughing at me. Today though, now that I had seen him, he walked over. Slowly, he shuffled over, head still at an angle, still laughing. He stopped a meter away from my chain and stopped laughing. He looked me over a few minutes before he spoke. You see how easy it was to get to you, how easily your family was hospitalized. No one would even notice you were gone. Your own pack hates you. It was him. He brought the rogues to hurt my family, and now he was in front of me. And I couldn't protect myself. I could do nothing except cover my head with my arms, curling up in a ball and waiting. I could take you now, but where would the fun be in that? I like a challenge. I'll wait for your wolves to be back, then take you from right under their noses. Show them just how powerful I am. It will stop them coming after me. How cocky then. He could take me, make his life easy. No one would, or could stop him. But instead he wants a challenge, and that will be his downfall. The next morning my life went back to normal. The wolves woke me up with pelting me with rocks. As they hit my skin I thought back to what Sky said. They were closer to waking up. I would be home soon. Sky came running over, knocking the wolves flying like bowling pins. To my agent extraordinaire, Mylan Noban, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. To my agent extraordinaire, Mylan Noban, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. They're waking up. I just stared at her, not believing my ears. Are you sure? I whispered, my throat protesting to being used after a few days of screaming in pain and no water. Yes, I was going to check on them this morning when the doctor came over and said they were all out of a coma and should wake up today. If not, maybe tomorrow. I looked at her, not believing what I was hearing. She nodded once more before rushing off. I forgot to tell the pack. That's the reason I was sent over here. I laughed at her back as she rushed off. The silver still hurt like hell, but knowing they were recovering put a smile on my face. Nothing could dampen my mood all day. Not the pack members jeering at me about how the alpha will be awake soon. Then your hell will really start. In fact, I wanted to laugh at that. Not even my favorite, God coming to me for my daily dose of public humiliation. Because I knew it would be over soon. Knowing I would be free soon. And knowing I would be back with Forrest soon, made the silver burn less. I smiled at everyone who passed me and freaked out at least half of them. I knew the man would be laughing from the tree line again that night, but I couldn't bring myself to care. I would be home soon. All night I waited, but they didn't come. They weren't awake. Not yet. The man came, laughing and grinning. I ignored him. I waited. As the minutes ticked by, I started to lose hope. Maybe I wouldn't be going home soon. But as the sun rose in the sky, I heard an angered growl from the direction of the pack hospital. I couldn't hear much of what was going on, but I did see 5 figures standing at the doorway. Ash, Sky, Ela, to my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nilben, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. And Forrest, to my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nilben, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. Ela and Forrest looking murderous, Sky and Ash looking smug. I told you so, ready on their lips. I just smiled. I was more than ready to be out of this collar. Chapter 26, The Attack Forest's POV. Arya had been acting weird all morning. In the end I put it down to worry. Whether the pack liked her and if she would be a good Luna. I believe in her. So do my parents. But sometimes she doesn't believe in herself. My dad thought it probably had something to do with the years of neglect and her dad telling her she was useless. Over time she started to believe him. I walked into our room after my shower to find Arya deep in thought. She looked scared. I walked over, clearing my throat. She didn't even notice me. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nilben, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. She continued staring into space, not noticing me. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nilben, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. Are you okay? Suddenly hearing me, she turned around. She started to see me behind her. Are you okay? I was calling to you, but you were so spaced out you didn't even notice me. She shook her head, as if clearing it. Sorry. I'm fine. Lost in thought. She shook her head again, blinking a few times. Care to share? She shook her head again, still looking slightly lost in thought, before walking downstairs. I followed her down and into the car. I had already suggested she stayed at home, which she wasn't very happy about. The whole time we were in the car she was lost in thought. My parents tried to talk to her, with the same results as me. Once we got to the training grounds, she seemed to get better. She was still witchy, but she was more. She wasn't lost in thought. Her eyes shined as she saw the monkey bars. I would have to take her here to train so she could use them. Just then 2 of our best warriors came over. Frank and Stella, Sky's parents. They were having some problems with some of the younger wolves not taking things seriously. It was easy to fix. Just go over to them. Let my wolf flash them his teeth. Instant obligation. Once that was sorted, I went back to find Arya. She wasn't there. I went over to my mum. Have you seen Arya? She shook her head. I thought she was with you. This time I shook my head. She can't have gone far. I'll ask some warriors to see if they can find her. I nodded and went back to my dad while my mum linked some of the most trusted warriors. She will turn up soon. No need to worry. My wolf said calmly in my head. If my wolf is calm, I have no need to worry. I walked around the training ground, helping some of the younger wolves train. Training started for all young wolves when they turned 8. Although if they wanted they could take additional classes if they wanted to be a warrior or a tracker. Most wolves did 3-hour training a week, changing into 5 hours when they turned 13. After helping some 9-year-olds get their punching technique better, using a punching bag, not each other like they wanted, I got a link from one of the warrior wolves looking for Arya. We found her. She's near the pack house. Do you want us to bring her back? The wolf asked. I thought about it for a minute. No, just keep an eye on her for me. I walked over to my parents to tell them where Arya was and also what the plan was, when suddenly a horrible smell wafted over to me. A stench of death. Of rotten food and rotten skin. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nilben, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. They came pouring out of the trees in their hundreds. They weren't skilled fighters, but there were only 40 of us training, some being only children. We were outmatched 10-1. I shifted and lunged at the nearest rogue, whipping out its throat. I knew some of the wolves had gone to get some backup, so while we waited for them to arrive I took out as many rogues as I could. Run, fight. Rip, kill. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nilben, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. It was going fine. We were destroying their ranks, and as soon the extra wolves got here, we would have a good advantage. Suddenly a massive group of rogues surrounded some of the young children. They had been hiding, but they must have got scared and tried to run. I changed direction, heading straight for the crowd of rogues. From the corner of my eye I saw my parents running that way as well, not stopping when they reached the wall of rogues, shoving through and killing rogues as they ran. I ran harder, pushing myself to reach the children before the rogues could touch them, killing any and every rogue that got in my way. I reached the children at the same time as my parents. We had managed to get inside the circle with the children, but we were still surrounded by rogues. I lunged first, going for the rogue in front of me. It seemed to snap everyone out of the little staring contest they were having, and suddenly I was being attacked by multiple rogues, which I couldn't get rid of because I had rogues attacking the children to kill first. I could see, from the corner of my eye, my parents had the same problem. They both were bleeding heavily, and I doubt I was much better. I was getting tired. These rogues were better fighters than the last, and we were still outnumbered until the backup arrived. We had managed to open up a small channel in the rogues' ranks, which we were able to get the children through. Now, without the children to worry about, the rogues surrounding us were much less of a big deal. We managed to fully open up the wall of rogues and came to fight them off separately. I was fighting on the north border, the farthest away from the pack house, whereas my mum was fighting on the clearing of the pack grounds, much closer to the pack house. My dad was fighting in between us. We were all still standing, but getting weaker. The rogues were still swamping us, although less than before, and I could see the warriors start to tire. I saw my mum fall. I was too far away. We were too far away. I couldn't get to her. I couldn't save her. I saw a rogue jumped at her. I saw my dad try to get to her. He was too far away. I saw the rogue about the land, jaw outstretched to deliver the killer blow, until suddenly the rogue was intercepted by a black wolf with a white belly and white socks. Only the white was stained red with the blood of the rogue before it hit the ground. I saw the wolf stand guard over my mum, keeping her safe while fighting off rogues. My wolf PE, she came to help us. I sniffed the air and my wolf was right. Under the almost overbearing stench of death, there was the unmistakable scent of my mate. I continued fighting off the rogues. It was much easier now we had the reinforcements. We now outnumbered the rogues. I was fighting, keeping one eye on Arya. She was fighting well, keeping the rogues off my parents and killing them quickly and efficiently. The rogues were quickly dying, and I could see, miraculously, we hadn't lost our warriors. I could feel the tiredness creeping up on me. The last of the rogues retreated, and Ash, Sky, Albert and Dolly went after them. I saw my mum and dad collapse on the floor as the doctors ran over to them. I wanted to go to sleep. The adrenaline was wearing off and I was in so much pain. But I had to see her first. I kept my eyes open as I waited to see her. I couldn't sleep until my mate was okay. It took her a few minutes to find me, and I felt myself drifting farther and farther away as I waited. I saw her coming through the trees, almost completely fine, barely a scratch on her. And that's when I lost the battle with the darkness and fell unconscious, knowing she would be there when I woke up.